There aren't many movie rental stores left these days. The rise of streaming services made them obsolete, wiping out chains like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, leaving just a few independent shops struggling to survive. But there's one in particular that has managed to hang on, even though it should have closed its doors years ago. Not because of the lack of customers, but because of the things that happen inside after dark. It's called Flicker's Video Rentals, and it's tucked away in a small, almost forgotten strip mall at the edge of town. It doesn't look like much from the outside, just an old sign with half the lights burned out and faded movie posters in the windows. If you didn't know it was there, you'd drive right past it without giving it a second thought. I started working there when I was in high school, back when renting movies was still a thing. It was a quiet job, and for the most part, I liked it. I'd spend most of my shift organizing DVDs, helping customers find what they were looking for and restocking the shelves after the returns came in. The pay wasn't great, but it was easy work, and I got to watch movies for free. The store had been around since the early 1980s, and it hadn't changed much since then. The walls were lined with shelves filled with everything from old VHS tapes to newer Blu-rays. There was even a small section for video games and posters for sale. But the thing that always caught people's attention was the back room. It was locked up most of the time, but if you worked there long enough, you'd hear the stories. Employees used to call it the horror vault, and rumor had it that some of the old tapes in there weren't just movies, they were something else entirely. I didn't believe in ghosts or any of that paranormal stuff, so I laughed it off whenever people would talk about it. But after my first year at Flicker's, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. It always seemed to happen at night, usually during the last hour of my shift when the store was mostly empty. The lights would flicker, just for a second, but long enough to catch my attention. I'd hear the faint sound of someone whispering, but when I turned around, no one was there. Sometimes DVDs would fall off the shelves for no reason, and I'd have to go pick them up. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. The store was old, after all, and things like faulty wiring or uneven shelves could explain most of it. But then something happened that I couldn't explain away. It was a Saturday night, and I was working the closing shift alone. We didn't get many customers that late, so I was just killing time, reorganizing the action movies section when I heard the door chime. I looked up, expecting to see someone walk in, but the door was still closed. No one was there. I brushed it off, figuring I'd imagined it, but then I heard it again. Ding. The door was definitely closed, but it sounded like someone had just walked in. I looked around the store, but it was empty. That's when I heard footsteps. They were faint, coming from the aisle behind me, like someone was slowly walking between the shelves. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I told myself it was nothing. I was alone, and the store was supposed to be closed soon. But the footsteps didn't stop. I turned the corner, expecting to see one of the regulars messing with me, but the aisle was empty. The only sound was the hum of the old fluorescent lights overhead. I stood there for a moment, listening, waiting for the footsteps to start again, but everything was quiet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. It was a shadow, just a flicker, but it moved across the aisle, disappearing behind one of the shelves. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt that familiar chill crawl down my back again. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. I grabbed my phone, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I started walking back toward the front of the store when I heard the whispering. At first, I couldn't make out what it was saying. It was faint, almost like the sound of wind blowing through the cracks in the walls. But as I got closer to the back room, the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was a voice. No, multiple voices. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the door to the back room. The door was locked, like always, but the whispering was definitely coming from inside. It was like someone, or something, was talking just behind the door. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to leave, just grab my stuff and get the hell out of there. but my keys were in the back room and I couldn't leave without locking up. So, against my better judgment, I walked up to the door and put my ear against it. The whispering stopped. For a second, everything was silent. Then, without warning, the door rattled, like someone had slammed into it from the other side. I jumped back, my heart racing, and stared at the door, waiting for something to happen. But it was still. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at that door, but eventually I snapped out of it. I grabbed my keys, locked the store as fast as I could, and ran to my car, not looking back. After that night, I told myself I'd quit, that the job wasn't worth it. But I didn't. I kept going back. Maybe it was the pay, or maybe I just didn't want to believe that the place was actually haunted. The next few weeks were quiet, and I started to convince myself that I had just imagined everything. But then, one night, I made a mistake that I'll never forget. It was late, and I was doing inventory when I noticed that one of the old VHS tapes was missing from the shelves. It was from the Horror Vault section, a collection of old horror movies that no one ever rented. I figured someone had moved it and forgot to put it back, so I went to the back room to check the inventory list. When I opened the door, the whispering started again. It was faint at first, just like before, but this time it didn't stop. It got louder, filling the room, echoing off the walls. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me, and the lights flickered. I was trapped. I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. I could feel the panic rising in my chest as the whispering grew louder and louder, until it felt like there were 100 voices all around me, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Then the lights went out. For a moment, everything was pitch black, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the whispering, which had turned into a low, guttural growl. I stumbled toward the door, banging on it, trying to force it open, but it was locked tight. And then I felt it, someone or something, standing right behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I could feel its presence, cold and heavy, breathing down the back of my neck. The whispering had stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. I stood there, frozen in place, waiting for whatever was behind me to make its move. Then the lights flickered back on, and the door swung open. I didn't waste any time. I ran out of the store, not even bothering to lock up, and I didn't stop until I was safely inside my car, my heart pounding in my chest. As I sat there, catching my breath, I glanced back at the store. The lights inside were flickering, just like they always did. And through the front window, I saw a figure standing by the back room door. I never went back after that. I don't know what happened in that store or what was hiding in the back room, but I do know one thing. Flicker's Video Rentals is still open to this day.